Toto Wolff says that George Russell and teammate Kimi Antonelli are off the leash and free to fight, but he's also left the door open to changing that as the season progresses. It's the 8th of April, this is Coffee Corner Motorsport, Espresso News. Let's get into today's show. Just 3 races in and Mercedes already have a title fight on their hands from within their own garage. Kimi Antonelli leads George Russell by 9 points, 2 wins to 1. Now, the pre-season narrative was all about how this was Russell's title to lose. Right now, though, it does not look that plain sailing for the Mercedes driver. Toto Wolff was asked this week how he plans to manage the situation in the garage. Speaking to media including Racing 365 and GP Blog, Toto said that both drivers are absolutely off the leash and free to race for now. As long as there's always a margin between the cars and there's no contact, he said they are absolutely fine to battle on the track. However, he did not rule out intervening later on. Toto said that towards the end of the season, they will see how the points fall and whether anything needs to be done to manage that situation. This is not a guarantee of free racing all year long. What it is, it's a conditional one for now that may turn into something later on as the season progresses. Now, Martin Brundle has been talking on the Sky F1 podcast. He was a lot more direct. He said that if he was George Russell, he would be more concerned after 3 races than he was at the start of the new season. He acknowledged that George Russell did all the hard yards at Williams. He waited, got to Mercedes, then they stopped dominating. And now, when he finally has a championship-winning capable car in front of him, he's got a 19-year-old teammate who's pushing hard for the same result. Now, Martin Brundle did add that he feels Russell's experience will count as the season progresses. Wet days, safety car restarts, the pressure of a long season. Kimi Antonelli is talented, but he is young and still learning. And Martin Brundle thinks that George's experience will count towards the end of the season. When talking about the Hamilton-Rosberg comparison, Toto was quick to distance himself from the situation. He said that these 2 situations are completely different. Nico and Lewis had a friendship that turned to a rivalry. He does not see the same happening here with the current drivers. However, former Ferrari driver Eddie Irvine completely disagrees. He was speaking to Italian press that's been reported on by Racing News 365, and Eddie Irvine said that he is 100% certain the 2 drivers will clash. He said the stakes are too high and the performances are too similar for Toto to step in with team orders. He's got to let them race, and that in turn will lead to clashes. 19 races left of 2026. The championship battle within Mercedes is fully on. And Mercedes, they've got a bigger internal conversation to manage than anyone expected at this point of the season. On the subject of battles, and we come on to engines, there is, of course, a regulation that could shift the competitive picture across the rest of the 2026 season. That's called ADUO, which stands for Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities. And it matters for almost every single team on the Formula One grid. And here's how it all works. Now, Mercedes, as we know, has set the benchmark with their W17 power unit. The 5 engine manufacturers on the grid are currently Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull Powertrains in association with Ford, Honda and Audi. Each one is measured against Mercedes on an ICE performance index. Now, under the new regulations, if a manufacturer is 2 to 4% below Mercedes, they will qualify for 1 additional upgrade this season and 1 additional upgrade next season. If they are more than 4% below, they will get 2 upgrades this season and 2 upgrades next season. Now, these are, of course, significant extra development windows in a heavily restricted environment that is, of course, now under an engine cost cap. Now, Racing 365 reported earlier this week that they expect Ferrari, Audi and Honda to qualify for these adjustments. Honda, who supply Aston Martin, are believed to, of course, be facing the largest deficit on the grid and could actually be in line for 2 upgrades this season. Their engine vibration problems are well documented. Now, Ferrari's power unit weakness is a much more interesting one. They've got a weakness on the straights, and it's been one of the clearest performance gaps in the opening 3 races. However, they are the closest team to Mercedes, but it is believed they've got a really good aero package that's masking some of the issues they got with their power unit. Now, Fred Vasseur has confirmed publicly that ADUO is needed for a clear improvement in Ferrari's performance. Audi's difficult starts are being linked back to deployment issues with their new power unit, and Matteo Binotto has confirmed that fixes will not come quickly without external help. However, Red Bull Powertrains is the most interesting case. Now, speaking earlier to Planet F1, Laurent Mekies says that he firmly believes that Red Bull will too be in that ADUO group. However, their power unit has been more competitive than people expect. It's the weight of the Red Bull that's a problem, not the power unit. they could qualify for the minimum, or it looks like they are set to miss out entirely on any updates to that engine. There's also a timing complication that the FIA need to fix first in all of this, though. When this was first introduced, the ADUO was designed to trigger after 6 races on the Formula 1 calendar. But with Bahrain and Saudi Arabia now cancelled, Miami is now technically only round 4. The FIA has reportedly proposed bringing this assessment forward so the first upgrades can still arrive around the Canadian Grand Prix in May as they were originally planned, but that proposal has not yet been confirmed by the FIA. Now, this applies to not only the teams, but the teams they supply. So Mercedes and their customer teams, of course, do not qualify for any additional updates. They have set the standards, but their rivals, however, they are now racing to close a situation with a regulation that was specifically built to close the gap on the leading car and make Formula 1 more competitive. Talking about engines, we're going to come on now to a garage, and that is the Red Bull garage. Yuki Tsunoda lost his Red Bull seat at the end of 2025. He scored just 33 points in total last season and was, of course, replaced by Isaac Hadjar for 2026. He is now a reserve and simulator driver for the Red Bull organisation, covering both teams. But Laurent Mekies has not closed the door firmly on a Yuki return. Speaking on the Beyond the Grid podcast and reported by Motorsport.com, Laurent Mekies says that he feels Yuki Tsunoda deserves another opportunity to race in Formula 1. He said it's fair to say that Yuki has shown significant speed in the past and that everyone within Red Bull wishes another opportunity to come his way. Now, of course, Laurent Mekies was Yuki's boss at Racing Bulls, where he enjoyed a vast majority of his success. Laurent Mekies, though, was clear that that Red Bull seat is not that opportunity, not at the moment, for Yuki Tsunoda. Isaac Hadjar has impressed since making the step up. He qualified P3 on his debut in Melbourne, scored points in China, and also outqualified Max Verstappen in Suzuka. That last one is something that Yuki Tsunoda never managed during his time with the senior Red Bull team. So the question then is, where could a door open for Yuki Tsunoda? One name that keeps popping up is, of course, Haas. Now, speaking to Motorsport.com back in January, Haas team principal Ayo Komatsu said you can never say never when asked about Yuki Tsunoda. Haas were reported to have been interested in Yuki back in 2024 before Red Bull held his contract. However, there is, as we know, a Japanese angle worth noting. Haas do have a technical partnership with Toyota, and Yuki Tsunoda, as we know, carries significant Honda backing. Both connections would put Japanese motorsport interest in his corner. Nothing is confirmed, but Haas is one of the most credible landing points being discussed, especially if it comes with significant monetary backing. Laurent Mekies acknowledged that Red Bull's record with their second car has not been strong at all in recent seasons, and has said it's something that the organisation is working on to change. But Yuki Tsunoda's path back to Formula 1 is not through multi-teams, it seems. Another option is, of course, Aston Martin with that significant Honda backing we talked about with Yuki Tsunoda. Should Lance Stroll or Fernando Alonso call time on their Formula 1 careers, judging by the troubles that Aston Martin are currently having, Yuki Tsunoda could quite easily slot into Aston Martin team, especially if they're struggling and need a driver just to fill a seat. That would, of course, suit a lot of parties and allow Aston Martin to develop whilst keeping Honda happy at the same time, something all parties are keen to do. But whether or not it's Haas or whether or not it's Aston Martin, Laurent Mekies clearly believes that Yuki Tsunoda deserves another chance within Formula 1. Meanwhile, back in the Ferrari camp, and Lewis Hamilton has been talking about the 2026 regulations. He's pushed back on the criticism of the 2026 cars and this so-called yo-yo racing. Now, this yo-yo racing is where drivers cannot break away from overtaking because their battery depletes and the car behind recovers and gets past them. It's been one of the most debated topics of the new 2026 regulations. But Lewis Hamilton is not having any of it. Speaking to media, including Racing 365, he said if you go back to go-karting, you will see the same thing happening over and over again. People going backwards and forth, unable to break away. Nobody calls that yo-yo racing. He also pointed out that he's been doing this for more than 20 years, and this is not a new phenomenon, but it's a different take to, of course, most of the Formula 1 grids. Lando Norris has called it gut-wrenching. Fernando Alonso, as we know, have called this the Battery World Championship. And Max Verstappen has been one of the most vocal critics about the new regulations before and during the 2026 season. Now, Lewis Hamilton's defence is not purely about the racing spectacle either. He told the media that he's finding the 2026 cars much more fun to drive than any previous generation in his Formula 1 career. Now, that is, of course, a significant statement from a 7-time world champion. Heaton will address whether or not the energy management issues need changing. And regardless of whether the drivers agree with Hamilton's assessment, it's a view that is, of course, worth noting and taking into account when the FIA make those decisions. Not everyone in the paddock thinks that this new formula is broken. And finally, on to Williams. Carlos Sainz has confirmed that Williams are investigating a recurring problem with their car. He first noticed this when he joined the team last season. Speaking to Planet F1, Carlos explains that the car has a certain characteristic where the inside front tyre loses load through certain corners. That reduces grip and gives it a kind of free-wheel driving experience. He described noticing it from his very first lap in Abu Dhabi in 2024, where his course took place in that postseason test. Now, Williams worked around this last season and improved it and got some great results. But as soon as the new regulations arrived and reduced the overall downforce levels, it came back once again with a vengeance. Now, Alex Albon, who has of course been driving for Williams since 2022, told media that the inside front grip issue has always been present throughout his time with the team. It's a characteristic that has gone from car to car to car, but the new regulations have made it significantly worse. Carlos said that both drivers have given clear direction to the engineers on when it happens and how it feels when it happens, and the team is of course now working to understand what is embedded within that car that's causing these problems. Williams sit P9 in the Constructors' Championship with just 2 points, with a car that is rumored to be around 26 kilograms overweight. The problems for the team are multiple, and the front grip issue is just one more item on a very long list that the team have to deal with. This April break should help, and every single team is back in the factory course working on fixes before Miami. But Williams, it seems, has more ground to make up than most of their rivals. So, Toto Wolff says his pack are off the leash and free to fight, but read between the lines and there is a caveat. The ADUO regulation could have Ferrari, Honda and Audi a lifeline before the summer. Yuki Tsunoda is waiting for a door to open. Laurent Mecchi thinks he deserves to walk through that door. And Haas and Aston Martin might just have one slightly ajar for him. And Lewis Hamilton says the cars are the most fun that he has ever driven, even if most of the Formula One grid disagrees with him. And then we come to Williams, who are still trying to understand the problem that has been on their cars since before Carlos Sainz even arrived within the team. This is Espresso News. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Everything is linked in the description. And I will see you tomorrow with another episode. Catch you all later. Have a great day.